In
You're out of
1959,
line, old man.
Route 66 was more
Sheriff,
than
what's the
just a
trouble
road.
here?
He can't
It was
just evict
America's
me!
lifeblood. From Chicago to Los Angeles, it snaked through the Arizona desert like a fiery red snake under the scorching sun. John Wayne, or Duke as everyone called him, was driving his gleaming black Ford Thunderbird. He had just finished filming the Alamo and needed a long drive to think. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a deep, distinctive voice, Duke, now 52, still exuded the aura of a Wild West hero. He stopped at Cactus Rose Diner, a familiar roadside diner with a flashing neon sign that read, "Hamburger and Pie, open 24/7. Inside, the air was filled with the aroma of roasted coffee, smoked meats, and the laughter and chatter of truck drivers, traveling families, and a few locals. Duke walked in, his cowboy hat slightly askew, his leather jacket worn, his shoes dusty. Everyone recognized him instantly, but Duke only smiled and nodded, disliking the commotion. He sat at the bar, ordered a black coffee and a slice of apple pie. Beside him sat a man in his 30s, wearing a worn-out military jacket with a faded Purple Heart badge on his chest. His name was Elias Thompson, a World War II veteran, recently returned from a veterans camp in California. Elias trembled as he held his glass, his eyes sunken from the nightmares that still haunted him. Suddenly, the door burst open. Sheriff Harlan Buck, a burly man with a flushed face and gleaming badges, entered with 2 deputies. He pointed directly at Elias. "Here you are again, you vagrant. I warned you before. No money, no food, get out." Elias tried to explain, his voice hoarse. "Sir, I only asked for a coffee. I have medals. I fought for this country." Sheriff Buck sneered, grabbed Elias by the collar, and dragged him out the door. "Fight! You're just a burden now. Route 66 isn't a place for beggars in old uniforms." Everyone in the cafe fell silent. Some bowed their heads, a few whispered. Duke sat still, observing. His hand tightened around the handle of his coffee cup. The atmosphere in the Cactus Rose Diner suddenly froze like the Arizona desert in the middle of a summer day. The soft clatter of a porcelain tray falling silenced the initial murmurs. All eyes turned to Sheriff Harlan Buck, who was gripping Elias Thompson's collar. Elias, his body gaunt from years of war, struggled, but his legs trembled from exhaustion and unhealed old wounds. "Release him, Sheriff!" John Wayne's voice was deep and warm, yet carried the weight of a man who had faced hundreds of robbers on screen and in real life. Duke rose from his bar stool, his towering figure, over 2 meters tall, blocking much of the light from the dusty glass window. His worn cowboy hat was slightly askew, his leather jacket frayed at the shoulders, but his eyes were sharp as blades. Sheriff Buck spun around, his face flushed red with sun and anger. "Mr. Wayne, this is a matter for the law. This fellow has been wandering around for days, penniless and causing trouble. Route 66 is not a relief station." Elisa coughed, his voice hoarse. I only asked for a hot cup of coffee. I have the Purple Heart medal, sir. I shed blood in Normandy. This country, I fought for it." A truck driver sitting nearby bowed his head, his hands gripping his beer glass. Martha, the owner, stood behind the counter, her hands trembling as she wiped dishes. Her daughter, Lily, a 17-year-old girl with braided hair tied back with a scarf, covered her mouth, her eyes glistening with tears. Duke walked slowly, each step like a drum beat. He placed a thick wad of banknotes on the counter, enough to pay for Elias's meal and a round of coffee. "I'm paying for him, and for everyone here, including you, Sheriff. Now release him." The atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Sheriff Buck hesitated, his gaze sweeping across the familiar face of John Wayne. An American icon, a man admired by both children and adults. Whispers began to rise from the tables. Another old veteran sitting in the corner tapped his cane on the floor. "That's right. That kid fought the Nazis and we're kicking him out. For what?" Sheriff Buck released his grip, but his voice remained firm. This time only, Wayne. Don't think that just because you're a Hollywood star, you can interfere in my business." Duke smiled slightly. Not the smile of an actor, but the smile of a seasoned veteran. He extended his hand to shake Elias's, his large, warm hand gripping the veteran's cold hand. "Sit down, young man. Duke's treat. No one's going to be kicked out today." Elias looked up, his eyes red and swollen. He sat down like a broken doll. Duke ordered another sandwich, hot coffee, and a slice of apple pie for Elias. Martha hurried to get ready, tears streaming down her cheeks as she remembered her husband, a soldier who had never returned from the Pacific. The whole place breathed a sigh of relief. A few people applauded sporadically. Duke sat next to Elias, his voice low. "Tell me about it. Normandy, which year? I have friends who were there." Elias Thompson held a cup of hot coffee, the warmth spreading through his trembling hands. He looked at Duke as if he were an unexpected savior. "I boarded the ship in 1942, Mr. Wayne. That was the first time I saw the sea. Normandy. Gunfire rained down. My friend fell beside me, his blood staining the sand red." Duke nodded, his eyes distant. He remembered the soldiers he had met during his wartime propaganda, the letters from veteran fans. "I didn't go to war like you, but I know what loss is. My friends didn't come back either. You did the right thing, Elias. Don't let anyone say otherwise." Martha brought out the food, her voice trembling. "Mr. Wayne, you're not just an actor. You are the real Duke." Lily stood beside him, her eyes shining as she looked at her idol. She whispered, "Uncle Duke, is Hollywood really as beautiful as it is in the movies?" Duke laughed loudly, his laughter echoing through the diner. He recounted behind-the-scenes stories from Stagecoach, his real-life horseback riding in the desert, and even his experiences driving trucks for a living before his fame. Elias gradually opened up, talking about his family. His wife died of illness while he was in the war, and his 15-year-old son was in Tucson, but he hadn't dared return home yet because he was ashamed of their poverty. The truck drivers around them began to join in. One man named Hank, a large man with a thick beard, told stories of transporting goods along Route 66 and once rescuing a family stuck in traffic. A warm atmosphere gradually spread. Sheriff Buck sat in a corner, initially silent, but then he ordered a coffee and listened. Duke observed it all, his emotions welling up. He thought about his fame, not for boasting, but for doing good. "We are all Americans. War doesn't end when the guns stop firing. It remains in each of our hearts." As the sun began to set, its fiery red rays streamed through the restaurant windows, casting a classic black-and-white film hue over everything. Duke didn't just sit and listen. He stood up, walked around the restaurant, and shook hands with everyone. To Martha, he inquired about the diner and promised to introduce some Hollywood friends to visit and promote it. To Lily, he told her about nursing schools and promised to write a letter of recommendation if she persevered in her studies. Elisa ate heartily for the first time in days. He spoke of his nightmares, of selling his medals because he was hungry. Duke listened without judgment, only occasionally nodding and placing his hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to get you back to your son." Sheriff Buck finally spoke, his voice slightly hesitant. I was just following the law, but perhaps I was too rigid." Duke looked him straight in the eye. "The law is for protecting, not driving out the weak, Harlan. You are the sheriff of this community. Be a true hero." The whole pub applauded. The atmosphere was like a big family gathering. Outside, the desert wind blew fiercely, red dust swirling everywhere. But inside the Cactus Rose Diner, hearts were unusually warm. Late that afternoon, a sudden desert storm struck. The wind howled, sand swirled, and torrential rain poured down. Route 66 was flooded, and traffic was gridlocked. The diner became a makeshift shelter. Duke quickly organized. He assigned people to move belongings to higher ground, check windows, and use his Thunderbird to transport those in need to the nearest gas station. Elias helped as much as he could, despite his weakness. Lily ran to get a warm blanket. Sheriff Buck, now with a changed demeanor, helped Duke push a stuck car out of the water. Amid the chaos, Duke told Elias about his plan. "Tomorrow I'll drive you to Tucson. Your son needs his father." When the storm subsided, everyone gathered around a makeshift fireplace. Duke sang an old western, his deep, warm voice moving everyone. Elias covered his face and wept. "Thank you, Duke. You didn't just save me today. You saved my soul." Duke smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "We saved each other, boy. That's how we Americans live." The desert storm brought not just rain and wind, it carried buried memories. Inside the Cactus Rose Diner, neon lights flickered due to a power outage. Rainwater seeped through the cracks in the door, forming small puddles on the old wooden floor. John Wayne, Duke, stood in the middle of the diner like a sturdy pillar. He took off his leather jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and his deep, warm voice resonated. "Everyone stay calm. We'll get through this. Hank, check the back door. Martha, get blankets for the children and the elderly." Elias Thompson, though exhausted, still tried to help. He held a broom, his hands trembling, but his eyes now held a glimmer of hope. "I never thought I'd receive help like this, Mr. Wayne. In Normandy we also waited for rescue, but often it never came." Duke placed his hand on Elias's shoulder, squeezing gently. A complex mix of thoughts swirled within him. As a Hollywood star, he could easily have returned to his luxurious mansion, but tonight Duke chose to stay with ordinary people on Route 66. He remembered his father, a hard-working man from Iowa, and the lesson of quiet compassion. "Boy, sometimes the rescuer is the person next to you. We are each other's rescuer." County Harlan Buck, his coat soaking wet, stepped in from the road, his face weary. His patrol car was stuck in the mud. "Wayne, I need help. There's a family stranded half a mile from here." Duke didn't hesitate. He took out his Thunderbird keys. "I'll go with you. Elias, you stay here and help Martha. Lily, keep everyone warm." The two men drove off into the storm. Headlights cut through the darkness, the red dust and rainwater creating a scene reminiscent of a classic black and white film. On the way, Sheriff Buck confessed, "I was wrong. My job has made me rigid. My wife died last year. I blame everything." Duke listened, without judgment. "We all have wounds, Harlan. What matters is how we heal." They rescued the family, a young couple and their small child, and brought them back to the diner safely. When they returned, the whole place cheered. Elias hugged Duke tightly, tears mingling with the rain. "You're a true hero." The storm subsided around midnight. Desert stars twinkled in the clear Arizona sky. Cactus Rose Diner became a warm shelter with its makeshift gas stove. Everyone gathered around the table, sharing leftover food. Duke sat beside Elias, and the two talked all night. Elias opened up completely. "My son, Tommy, 15, is in Tucson. He has lung disease from living in the slums. I'm too ashamed to go back. Selling my Purple Heart medal was my last resort." His voice broke. Duke was silent for a moment, then said, "I'll take you there tomorrow. No one should be ashamed of having sacrificed for their country." Martha told the story of her husband, a Marine who went missing in Iwo Jima. Lily listened dreamily as Duke talked about Hollywood, filming under the desert sun, friends like John Ford. Sheriff Buck sat silently, but he began to recount times he had helped the locals, though sometimes too harshly. The atmosphere warmed. A truck driver played the harmonica, and Duke sang along to Red River Valley. The warm, soothing sound spread, dispelling some of the sadness of war. Duke observed it all, his heart filled with hope. Route 66 is not just a road, it's a place where people find each other. Early the next morning, as the sun rose from behind the mountains, Duke decided to take concrete action. He wrote Martha a large check to repair the shop after the storm, and promised to introduce Lily to a hospital in Los Angeles if she persevered. The next morning, Duke drove Elias to Tucson in his Thunderbird. Route 66 was still damp, but the Arizona sun quickly dried it out. In the car, the two men shared more. Duke talked about the movies he'd been in, but also acknowledged the pressure of fame. "People think I'm Superman, but I'm just a cowboy who likes riding horses and helping people." Elias recounted details about his son. Tommy had a high fever, his mother had died young, and he lived with his frail grandmother. Duke stopped at a gas station to buy gifts and medicine. When they arrived in Tucson, they found the small, dilapidated house. Tommy lay in bed, his face pale, but his eyes lit up when he saw his father. "Dad, you're home." The reunion was tearful. Duke called his private doctor in Hollywood, arranging for free treatment. He stayed the whole afternoon, telling Tommy stories of the Wild West, making the boy laugh out loud for the first time in months. Sheriff Buck, who had followed in his patrol car, witnessed everything and was completely changed. "Wayne, you taught me a great lesson. I'm going to set up a veterans support fund in this county." On the way back, Elias gripped Duke's hand tightly. "You didn't just save me, you saved my whole family." Returning to the Cactus Rose Diner late in the afternoon, news of Duke's actions had spread throughout Route 66. Truck drivers stopped to tell stories, locals brought food to help repair the diner. Lily excitedly showed the letter of recommendation Duke had written to her. Martha hugged Duke and wept. "You are our benefactor." Duke humbly shook his head. "I only did the right thing. We can all be heroes in our own way." He spent the end of the day sitting with Elias and Tommy, who had been temporarily taken home, listening to their future plans. Elias decided to stay and work at the diner, and Sheriff Buck promised to provide legal support so he could receive veteran benefits. As dusk fell, Duke prepared to continue his journey. He looked back at the diner one last time, smiling. His heart was at peace. Fame was less important than the people he had touched. The story of Duke saving veterans on Route 66 began to spread by word of mouth, inspiring many others. The morning after the storm, Route 66 looked as if it had been washed clean by desert rain. Red dust still clung to the sparse leaves of the trees lining the road, but the Arizona sun had returned brilliantly, transforming everything into a vivid black and white film scene. John Wayne, Duke, awoke from his makeshift couch in the Cactus Rose Diner. His tall frame ached slightly from the sleepless night, but his eyes were sharp and his heart full of determination. Elias Thompson sat by the window, gazing into the distance. Tommy, his 15-year-old son, had been brought back from Tucson by Sheriff Harlan Buck's patrol car the previous night. The boy lay on a makeshift bed in the corner of the diner, his face still pale, but his eyes lit up when he looked at his father. "Dad, Duke really is a hero like in the movies, isn't he?" Duke smiled, his deep, warm laughter echoing through the diner. He sat down beside Tommy, his large hand gently patting the boy's shoulder. "This isn't a movie, son. Real life is sometimes much harder, but we have each other, and we'll get through it." Elias gripped his son's hand tightly, tears streaming down his sun-tanned face. He told Tommy about his days in Normandy, not to boast, but to let the boy understand how strong his father had once been. Martha brought out a lavish breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, hot coffee, and fragrant apple pie. Lily, 17, scurried around helping, her face beaming. "Uncle Duke, I've read the letter of recommendation you wrote. I'm going to apply to nursing school in Los Angeles. Thank you so much." Duke nodded, his voice warm. "My dear, the road ahead won't be easy, but if you persevere, Duke will be here to support you. Hollywood needs good nurses like you." Sheriff Buck entered, this time not in his imposing uniform, but in a simple shirt. He sat down at the table, his voice strained. "Wayne, I've been thinking all night. I'm going to set up a small fund to support veterans in this county. No more evicting anyone for poverty. You taught me that the law must be accompanied by compassion. Duke squeezed his hand. Harlan, you're a good sheriff. Just remember, we're all fellow countrymen. Throughout the morning, the conversation flowed. Truck drivers stopped, bringing in food and old clothes. Another old veteran from the nearby gas station came over, hugged Elias, and shared stories of the bombing nights. The atmosphere in the Cactus Rose Diner was like a large family gathering. Duke watched it all, his heart overflowing with emotion. He remembered his own difficult years before fame, driving trucks along dusty roads, the loneliness amidst the Hollywood lights. Fame is just a facade. What matters is what you leave behind for others. At noon, Duke called from the cafe's public telephone. He contacted his private doctor in Hollywood, arranging for Tommy to receive free treatment at a good hospital. Elias stood beside him, his voice trembling. I don't know how to thank you, Duke. You didn't just give me coffee, you gave me hope again. Duke patted him on the shoulder. Boy, thank you for fighting. Now it's time for us to build a future together. Late in the afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the desert, news of Duke saving the veteran began to spread like wildfire across the prairie. Truck drivers stopping at the Cactus Rose Diner recounted the story with pride. A man named Hank, a large man with a goatee, exclaimed, I'll tell every stop along Route 66. John Wayne didn't just act like a hero, he lived like one. Duke shook his head modestly, but he didn't stop them. He knew this story could inspire many others. Elias and Tommy sat together, the boy asking his father all sorts of questions about the war and about Duke. Lily helped Martha clean up, occasionally glancing at Duke with admiration. Sheriff Buck held a small meeting with some locals, planning for the support fund. Duke spent the late afternoon driving his Thunderbird, carrying Elias and Tommy along a stretch of Route 66. The desert breeze blew gently, carrying the scent of sand and freedom. Look, boy, Duke said to Tommy. This road connects America. Every mile is a story. You'll be healthy and travel everywhere your father dreamed of. Tommy nodded, gripping his father's hand tightly. Back at the diner, a group of local reporters from Tucson, having heard the news, came to visit. Duke gave only a brief reply. I'm just doing what any American should do. Pay attention to the unsung heroes around us. No drama, no fanfare. That was Duke's style. That evening, everyone gathered around the outdoor fire. Duke sang Western folk songs, his deep, warm voice blending with the harmonica. Elias stood up, and for the first time in years, he sang along. Tears rolled down his face, but they were tears of joy. Sheriff Buck put his arm around Elias's shoulder. I'm sorry about what happened the other day. From now on, this is your home. Duke sat in a corner, observing and reflecting. His heart was more at peace than ever before. He thought about his wife and children at home, about his upcoming films, but most importantly, about this moment, when compassion touched ordinary people. The next morning, as the sun rose brilliantly over the Arizona mountains, John Wayne prepared to continue his journey. The gleaming black Thunderbird had been cleaned by Lily and Elias. Martha hugged him tightly, her voice choked with emotion. You are a benefactor to Cactus Rose. We'll hang your picture at the bar. Duke laughed. Hang a picture of a real hero, Martha. Veterans like Elias. Elias and Tommy stood by the car, the boy now healthier thanks to his medication. Duke, I'll grow up to help others like you. Duke patted his head. Certainly, Tommy. Remember, courage doesn't always require guns. Sometimes it's just a cup of coffee and a helping hand. Sheriff Buck shook Duke's hand firmly. I've changed, Wayne. This whole county will be better because of you. Duke nodded. We'll do it together, Harlan. As the car rolled away, Duke looked in the rearview mirror. The small Cactus Rose Diner now shone with hope. Elias waved. Lily ran a short distance, and Martha wiped away tears. Route 66 stretched ahead, red dust rising behind the wheels. Duke smiled to himself. An ordinary day on a long road, but it has changed many lives. He knew this story would be told for generations, not because he was a star, but because he was a man. Years later, Lily became a renowned nurse. Elias opened a veterans support organization along Route 66. Tommy grew into a strong young man. And Cactus Rose Diner still stood, with its small sign, "Where Duke taught us compassion." John Wayne continued his journey, but his quiet legacy was forever etched in the Arizona desert and in the hearts of those he touched.